Hello, Legend of the Samurai here with another Japanese lock, this time the Kaken KX3. This one is interesting in that it has three entirely separate and entirely different types of locking mechanisms. Now, independently, none of them are actually very good, so it's not an extremely difficult lock to pick, but you do still have to deal with all of them. So there are normal pin tumblers up at the top of the keyway. The left side uses springless sliders that ride in a track, and those interact with a sidebar. And the right side uses the same track on the other side of the key, because the key is reversible. But instead of springless sliders, it uses springless bar wafers, which are slightly different. All right. So, I'll be using a couple of little tricks here. One, those sliders and bar wafers start out right at the very bottom of the keyway, and getting them lifted up to the minimum height can be somewhat annoying. So this is a little bent piece of wiper insert that is just narrower than the minimum cut height on one of these keys. And so I'm just going to insert that in the bottom, under all of the sliders, and then I have an easy way of picking everything up all at once to get any minimum lifts set, and it will also tell me if something down there is binding. And then up top, I'll use top of keyway, and I'm actually tensioning off of a little ridge right here because it's got a scoop in the face of the plug that makes other tensioning a little difficult. Alright, so first off, everything down there is moving, which means the top pins are binding. And it's a super wide open keyway with no warding, so I'm just going to use a flag because I can. 2, 1... three, a little bit of core rotation. And now, these bottom elements don't have so much freedom of motion, so I'll go in, and this first one on the left, bound up, so I'll take that up to where it's got some springy range. And the second one on the left was also bound up a little bit. Check the right side. Okay, so now we got some more core rotation. The left side seems set, so it should just be the right side. And there we are. So we have the beginning of an open. You may have noticed there's a second mark over here. And because these are springless sliders, I'm actually going to take this out of the vise and hold it horizontal, because that's how it would be mounted, and so that's how gravity would work on this. So as I keep going over, it will get caught right there. And what's happening is these springless bar wafers are falling back into the original bottom holes they were in, but the shape of that hole means you can come back, and because they are springless, it means that, and now this is held horizontally, if you wiggle it a bit to get them to settle back to the other side, and then move in a smooth motion, you can get past that mark, because you just have to be slightly faster than gravity. Now, you do have to be careful, because you need to stop before the keyway gets to the top, because when the keyway gets to the top, the driver pins, which are significantly smaller than the keyway, will try to fall in. So now I'm using that packing piece again and just holding it in place, and shift that past the open keyway. Can take that out again. And now there's nothing left except the full circle for the open. All right, so there we are. Now to take it apart and show all of the little pieces. So the top pins are under a sliding cover on top, and you can see the holes for the rest of the elements, but they don't actually come out that way. Now to get the rest out, we have to pull the plug out. So first, here we have our sidebar on the left side. So this is just a normal straight sidebar, full width, nothing special there. And that, make sure we don't lose these tiny springs. That interacts with the sliders on the left side, and they are actually false gated. They're just not very well designed. We'll see that more in a minute. And then the other side, make sure I don't lose these, has bar wafers that can slide in and out of the top of the plug and the bottom as well. So with everything all the way up, they extend out like that. So getting these out in an orderly fashion. So there's one of our bar wafers. And then the other side, we have sliders. All right, so here is our plug. There is no warding in the keyway, but it is closed at the back, so it's all milled out. Then we have our square channel, so that's a round hole. It's been broached out square on either side for the sliders or the bar wafers. We have a slot for that sidebar, and then we have our holes for our pin tumblers up top. They use T-pin style key pins to keep them from falling into the keyway, but no other overmilling there. And other than that, it's a pretty standard plug. I suppose I can show how I was tensioning this a little better. So it's dished, which can make a lot of normal tension wrenches just sort of cam out. But if you get something that fits in that groove, you can tension from there. And then the housing itself is decidedly nicely machined. Everything's clean and crisp, and there isn't a whole lot of play between things, slides smoothly. So they did that fairly well. It's just the moving elements that let it down. So you can see down at the bottom, those are the holes that the bar wafers start off in, and that little radius bit on the right edge is what lets you back out of where it would relock. And then the top edge is where the bar wafers start, and then there's another set of holes that the sliders can travel up into if you significantly overset them. But that's well outside of the range that they actually interact with the sidebar. Then there's the 3 pin tumbler holes at the front, and then a detent for this sliding cover to snap into. As for the elements themselves, the drivers are all entirely standard. The key pins, so this one is totally standard, and the other 2 are vaguely spooled, although I could not get these to overset even attempting to. So they look nice, but they're not actually super functional. We'll move to the bar wafers next. So these are about as simple as an element can be. It's a stick with a nub that interacts with the track on the key, and when you have all of them aligned, they retract into the plug and no longer block rotation. So there's 4 of those. And then the sliders, so this first one does not have a false gate. So this just has 1 true gate. But the other 3, I'll start with these ones, they do have a shallow false gate. It is somewhat rounded at the edges, not very nice sharp cuts there. And also this one, the false gate is below the true gate, which means this can only ever trap overlifts. So that's not ideal. This one is the same cut height, so it is identical. And then this one actually has a proper false gate that is above the true gate, and you actually start off with it in that false gate, but because it is so shallow and the edges are slightly rounded, it's very simple to just sort of pop it up out of that. There's no need to counter-rotate at all. And those all interact with this sidebar. All right, go close up on all of these. So it has 11 movable elements. The bitting is somewhat limited in that they only use 3 positions on the top of the key. In this case, it's 1, 2, and max lift here. These other 2 are just sort of decoy cuts. And then because the key needs to be reversible, it has to be the same track on each side. So these 2 sets of elements will always complement each other. So if you figure out the bitting for one side, you already know the bitting for the other side, because it has to match. So they will always be symmetric with respect to rotation in the keyway. Again, this is the KX3, specifically the exterior cylinder. They also make an interior cylinder, which I believe interacts with the key from this point up. It's 1 slider on each side and 1 pin. So if you're going to try and find one of these, it's the exterior cylinder you want. But I'd also possibly recommend not getting one of these, because the same company makes an upgraded version, which I will be covering in my next video, which replaces these bar wafers with another set of false gated sliders, and they have more and more interesting top pins. So, in my opinion, it's only worth getting one of these locks, and the other one is by far more interesting. Alright, thank you for watching, and have a nice day.